We are now live. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, Rashid, and I'd like to thank our returning guest because I want to just go into her brain and see where it's at. Colonel Karen uh, Kwiatkowski. I always mess it up a little bit, but how are you doing today, ma'am?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I want to jump right into it because it's looking like there's war on the front in Ukraine. But what has Trump done in Venezuela? Everybody they're forgetting about the Venezuelan front. Has he just declared victory and gone home and to another front, or what is actually going on in Venezuela?
Well, I mean, he has declared victory because he's got the Chavez person, Rodriguez, President Delcy Rodriguez, is running the place. You know, she is a Chavista. I mean, she is part of Maduro's team. We haven't heard anything about Maduro. I guess they're going to put him on trial. Where's him and his wife being held? You know, totally disappeared from the news. You know, that doesn't even exist anymore. And then now, you know, Trump is paying back his allies that are not his international allies, his domestic friends and investors with the processing of this Venezuelan oil, whatever they can get out, which isn't a lot because, you know, the oil's in Venezuela is hard to get out to begin with. It's very viscous, thick oil. It takes a lot of work to get it out, the years of decay in some of the systems. But the oil that is coming out, they're shipping it to Texas to get processed by a friend of Donald Trump's. And they're starting to export it, and they don't want to give it to China. China had purchased a lot of this. We actually stole oil on tankers that had been paid for by China. That's pretty brazen. You know, that's a pretty brazen. I mean, if somebody did that to you, like just said, you know, your fuel oil in your house, they just came and said, you know, I'm glad you paid and filled up your tank because it's wintertime, but I need that oil. So I'm just going to take it, and you can't do it. And you go to the cops and they just shake their head and say, well, that's what let him do what he wants. You know, that's a very strange way to run your foreign policy. But also the latest news is we're also shipping that oil now to Israel, which is very interesting. You know, I'm sure Israel has lots of uses for energy since they've been conducting a war with all their neighbors, every one of their neighbors, and simultaneously a genocide in Gaza, which is still continuing despite any talk of you know, Trump board of peace or anything like that. But as far as Venezuela goes, you know, disappeared any thought of drug importation. Remember, he was supposed to be a big narco terrorist. I mean, you're telling me Darcy Rodriguez or Delcy, who is running the country for Trump, I guess, that she's innocent of any of these crimes? But see, really, she is, because they were made up crimes. They were not real crimes. So technically, I guess she's fine. But yeah, I mean, it reveals Trump's agenda and the people around him, their agenda. And it also reveals the Congress, you know, the total going along with, you know, they have no spine. They don't know how to exert congressional power, Article 1 power in the Constitution. This is what the Congress is supposed to do. They don't do that. And they haven't learned how to do it. And then, of course, the other exciting thing about Venezuela is he is starving out the Cubans. He has embargoed all energy. He's trying to. Most of their energy was coming from Venezuela, so he stopped that. And he's also trying to make sure nobody else brings in oil, which is going to be interesting. We talk about all the conflicts in the world. You know, the Chinese and the Russians are both interested in not seeing Cubans starve to death, which is what's happening because they have you know, their electricity. I mean, we're basically doing to Cuba what Russia is doing to Kiev, which is destroying their energy source in the middle of the winter. And that's a pretty cruel thing to happen. But that's a war, and also a war we're involved in, a war we got started, a war we are fueling, and we just pay lip service to trying to end it because Trump has no intention of ending the war in Ukraine. He likes these things. But anyway, yeah, Venezuela is part of a greater influence operation, not just by Trump, but also by Israel. Because when you say Trump, at this point, I don't think we can deny that he runs a Zionist foreign policy. And the Israelis themselves are very interested in diversifying their support beyond the United States. You know, they want to have more countries that are friends with them. The recognition of Somaliland, which happened not too long ago, first UN member country, although I don't know how Israel can be a member of the UN, but whatever, they are. But Israel was the first UN member to recognize Somaliland, which is a breakaway republic, but it's been functioning independently from the rest of Somalia for 30 years. So that's a good length of time. I mean, if you think about the age of Ukraine has only been independent since 91, 92. So same type of thing, a young country. But of course, Ukraine, we had no trouble. The Europeans loved to recognize Ukraine right away because it served the purpose of, boxing in Russia and insulting Russia and promoting an anti-Russia, narrative, getting more raw materials for Europe, because, Ukraine did at one time before this war has decimated its productivity. Ukraine was a source. It was a pass through for oil and gas, but it was also a big agricultural source. Europe saw recognizing Ukraine is really cool, but no one has seen fit to recognize Somaliland. And it's much smaller, but it does have strategic value. But Israel has done that. And they've done it to try to turn the tables on the regional power plays that they are big time involved in. And part of that is to increase allies, to create them out of thin air if they can. And they're doing that with Trump in Central and South America as well. So, I'd like to say Trump is an American president. I would like to say that. I cannot say that because he is so obviously in the pocket of his master or his servant. I don't know which it is. It depends on the day, perhaps. But 9 visits from Netanyahu in a year to Trump. I think that's what it is. He's seen him 9 times, and he got a special. He's a war criminal, so they have to guard him when he comes into the country. They have to, he has to have police escort because we're protecting him from somebody else that might try to kidnap him and send him into the International Criminal Court, which is he's been indicted there, I guess. Anyway, so that's that part. Venezuela is now useful to us. I don't know what Trump's plan is, but we do have Rubio, and Rubio is very much a Cuba guy. Right. And so his goal for Venezuela was to ultimately, he wants to take over Cuba. He wants to take all the Cuban Floridians who want to go back to Cuba and go back to making money with their gambling and their cigars, and all these great things, which I think Cuba should be able to do whatever they want. And I think they should definitely be able to export their tobacco. I mean, this whole embargo thing is ludicrous, but it's not about freedom. Which, Rubio doesn't want to take over Cuba for freedom. He wants to take over Cuba for profit, for fun and profit. And to Trump, he's got Trump on board with this between the Venezuela thing and whatever. And, I don't know what will happen next. I mean, it looks like the next war will be Middle East again. And possibly maybe some European stuff or some trans-Caucasus type conflicts. Maybe Central America. I don't know where it will be, but Cuba could be a problem because he's starving Cubans. And Trump's doing to Cubans what Netanyahu's been doing to the Gazans. I mean, the whole idea is people are somehow responsible for their political leaders. Well, if that's the case, maybe we should be starved. Okay. I don't know. But the concept is we hold the people responsible for their government. But first we say, oh, they have a dictator. So their democracy isn't working right. It's not a good election. But we still hold them responsible for their leaders. And we say, okay, we're going to make life so tough for these people that they will overthrow their government in some sort of violent action, which is really not logical. I mean, some of those things that we're saying must not be true if the other things are true. I mean, you can't say, oh, they have a democracy, so, it's okay, they're represented. But then we say, oh, they have a terrible government that doesn't represent them. So let's torture the people and starve them and ruin their water supplies and do all these things. So anyway, that's what's going on in Cuba, which I don't, it really is a bad look for us. But again, Trump is so surrounded by Zionists who are they're heavily invested in defending and continuing what they're doing in the Middle East, certainly what they're doing to Gaza, that they want Trump to be, they say, this is great. You should just starve the people out and see what happens. And then your people, your Cuban Americans, your businessmen in Florida can come take it over. That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing in Gaza. That's the Gaza plan from long before October 7th. Anyway, so I don't know. People elected Trump. You know, he told a lot of stories that made people think that he would be anti-war, take care of Americans, you know, not have a crazy deficit, not have federal police knocking people in the head in all our cities. You know, these are the things he said he would do. He hasn't done those things. And the economy hasn't gotten better, which maybe not his fault entirely, but the tariffs didn't help. You know, the tariffs have not been this huge boost to the American economy. I just don't know what to say. Okay, I went too long. I'm sorry.
No, you gave out a lot of good stuff, and I wanted to say, when it comes to Venezuela and when it comes to Cuba, maybe it's a little more strategic than the average person thinks, because they can take China. They believe that they can take China and Iran off the board in Latin America, and when it comes to Cuba, that has been a thorn in America's side, because it gave Russia strategic depth against the United States in the deploying of missiles close to Russia. Russia could, in turn, do the exact same thing. And so I remember hearing a few days ago when they were talking about blockading Cuba, the Russians said that they would not allow that to happen, that they would use all means necessary to aid an ally with help their ally. And this was out this morning. The headline says, Russia preparing oil lifeline to Cuba, according to the Russian embassy. It says the move comes as U.S. seeks to cut off the island from energy supplies. And I'm thinking that the reason the United States is putting so much pressure on these Latin American nations is because they are positioning towards BRICS, and they're having more of an independent policy. But at the same time, I was always telling people that if they move against Venezuela, it would be a direct assault on Cuba, because of Cuba's strategic depth, concern vis-a-vis concerning Russia, and also its independent policy and how it's showing people to resist sanctions for 60 plus years or whatever like that.
That's right.
And the empire does not want other people to take part of this. But again, you said something that and I'll let you comment, but you said something. I have to play this clip for you right here. And this is from Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm going to bring it up on the screen, and I hope that you guys can hear it real quick. Let me bring it up on the screen. And here we are right here.
I think people are realizing it was all a lie. It was a big lie for the people. What MAGA is really serving is, in this administration, who they're serving is their big donors, the big donors that donated all the money and continue to donate to the president's PACs and donate to the 250th anniversary, and are donating to the big ballroom. And if they're donating to all these things, those are the people that get the special favors, they get the government contracts, they get the pardons, or somebody they love or one of their friends gets a pardon. And it's the foreign countries that are running the show here. It's the major big corporations and what is best for the world. That's really what MAGA is. That's the results. That's what we're seeing after one full year of MAGA. MAGA is, I think people are realizing.
So what do you have to say about that? Because she was a pro
big time MAGA, big time Trump supporter. She helped Trump quite a bit. She was a real asset. In fact, people didn't even know who she was really until the second Trump campaign. You know, she was a big player there, and very much believed in all these things that, I believe in a lot of them too. And so many people were taken in by these promises that it turns out he had no intention of doing it. And we should have realized it. It's been a year, and you can see any MAGA voter, if he is saying, this is why Trump is doing this, all the other MAGA voters are looking at him going, you're crazy. That's not right. We know it now because it's been a whole year, but we could have seen this early on last spring when he said, Epstein, oh, nothing there. After he campaigned on everything being there, and it was going to be all exposed, and all this criminality, all this abuse of children and kidnapping, all the things that went on. He was going to expose that. And then it didn't even take a couple months, and he is like, oh, no, nothing there. And his little puppets that he has around him, Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, they all, prior to the election, oh boy, they were going to get in there and they were going to make stuff happen. They were going to expose these people and justice was going to be done. That's what they said, because that's what people wanted to hear. And they still want to hear it. But they changed their tune early on, and we should have realized. And then with his war fighting for Israel back in June, totally unnecessary, and clear to everybody who was pulling the strings on that. Trump is loyal to Netanyahu. He is not. Now, is he loyal or is he blackmailed? Has the Netanyahu and Mossad threatened to kill Trump's grandchildren? He has a lot of grandchildren. He loves his grandchildren. He has a lot of kids. Is this something Trump is doing because he's being held hostage? It would not be unusual. This is how Israel operates with every of their foreign relations. It is always about pressure and threats, blackmail. This is how they operate. And they're not the only country that operates like this, but they are probably the best one, that they are most effective at doing it, and particularly with the United States. So, I don't know if Trump, is being blackmailed by them, or he truly just really likes Netanyahu. Now, most people who know Netanyahu in Israel, they don't like him at all. His own allies don't like him. He is a really bad person in so many ways. He's he's a political animal. Anybody that's been in politics for 30, 40 years, as he has, he makes alliances, he breaks alliances, he says what he needs to say, does different things, looks out after Netanyahu. He looks out after himself. And all of his friends and allies in Israel know this, okay? They don't trust him and they don't like him. He serves the Zionist cause very well, so they have him. But for Trump, I don't know why Trump would like him. He's actually not like the person Trump would like. Trump likes flatterers, and Netanyahu does flatter him, but he also pushes him. And Trump does not like to be pushed. Netanyahu is extremely arrogant, and he lies. And Trump doesn't like other people's arrogance. He likes to be the most arrogant guy in the room. He likes that. So it's unclear why he's so in bed with Israel. But that last June, that was certainly an example, one of many over the past 30, 40 years of us fighting a war for Israel. But yeah, it's Trump's a lost cause. And he has done nothing about Gaza. He thinks that the Gaza thing was his 8th or 9th thing that he's finished. First off, he didn't finish any of these wars. He didn't even negotiate the things he takes credit for. He started wars. He's finished none of them. But in Gaza, the whole world sees pretty clearly what Israel planned to do, what Israel had been doing for 25 years or more in Gaza and in the West Bank. And they've seen it just accelerate. It all fits in with the expanding Israel narrative, which is part of Zionism. But the whole world sees it clearly now. And Trump is on the wrong side of history with this completely. And he has compromised Americans. He's compromised our military. He's compromised our major corporations that feed Israel weaponry, that support Israel in what they're doing. And I don't think that's going to ever be explained away. He's not going to walk away from that. That will be his legacy. Anyway, Gaza is not our topic necessarily today, but, there was something in the news about some of our bunker buster bombs, I guess, that vaporized, whole families. And there isn't even any remains left. And of course, those lack of remains are not counted. But I remember in the first year of this thing, there were estimates of losses, and just seeing the degradation, the total flattening of Gaza, which was largely an urban, it's not very big, right? It's 28 miles by 13 miles. It's not very big. And they decimated it. And they have a death count now, which they admit to be something like 70 or 80,000 people. But the estimates of how many they've killed is 680,000, probably closer to 700,000. Now, you say, oh, well, what's that? That's just a theoretical number. Okay, a theoretical number. We started with 2.3 Gazans by everybody's count prior to this. And now they talk about 1.5. When they talk about how many they want to leave, how many they want to stay, their starting point now is 1.5 million. That's 700,000 less than they had before. So I think Israel knows well what they've done. This has been a slaughter that has been totally recorded, observed in real time. It's not going to be something Trump can walk away from. He has damaged the United States' reputation hugely with our participation and blind support of what Israel has done. And again, this will be the end of Zionism also. I mean, the world will take care of that even if we don't. But, for us, Trump is supposed to be the pro-American guy. How can he make America be good, look good, and function well? Can he do that? He hasn't done any of those things. He has done nothing. And this is a huge disappointment. But it also teaches you that no matter who you elect, you get John McCain, right? And he will operate in full John McCain mode. And we got that again, once again. 3 years from now, we're going to elect another president. Let's hope that we have elections and we're not a dictatorship or we have a king. But let's say in 3 years we have an election and people will say, this is the most important election ever. This is going to make all the difference. And we're going to elect another John McCain because that's the rule. And I'm going to try to remember that because I like to get excited during an election year. But it's just does not pay off. We have to figure out a way to make change that does not entail playing voting games because that does not work. That doesn't work. And it's very disappointing for so many of the MAGA people, many who didn't vote. A lot of these independents that joined MAGA and voted for Trump both times came out of the woodwork, and they are not regular voters. Many of them, they don't like to vote. They don't think about voting, but he brought them out of the woodwork, and they are disappointed. They have said, you know what, we were right when we didn't vote. We were actually on the right path because here we voted for a guy, and look how we got the bait and switch.
Well, I want to give a thanks to Red Panda Pie for the 10 euro super chat. Thank you so much. But I want to ask you, is the Venezuela, because we're talking about Gaza and we're talking about, and I think all of this is interconnected. So yeah. Do you believe that the move against Venezuela, and now we see the shipping, the so-called shipping of oil to Israel, is in preparation for war so that Israel can have some type of energy coming in if Turkey decides to stop selling it Syrian and Iraqi oil, and Iran cuts off the Strait of Hormuz? Is this a move because it serves the U.S. no strategic interest at all? So is this a move to try to backstop any losses in petrol or in anything like that for Israel in the coming war?
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think of that. I was looking at the second battle group that he's sending over there, which tells me he's going to do it. Plus, this is what Trump does. I mean, Trump and Israel both, when Israel bombed Qatar to kill some Hamas negotiators, that was in the middle of negotiations. And when we did we participated in that 12-day war, that was also in the middle of negotiations. So for anybody who wants to deal with the United States or Israel, you can expect them to attack you with major force in the middle of whatever negotiations there are. So that makes me believe, yes, we are going to go to war again with Iran. But this time, Iran has said they're going to fight back. And this time, Iran's allies are going to maybe not enter the war, but they're certainly going to take action like what you just said there, controlling, stopping trade. And already some of the energy and trade has already been stopped and boycotted against Israel. So this shipment of Nicaraguan oil may be really actually more important, more significant than what it is. And I mean, what it might appear, it's not just energy, it's energy to sustain them during whatever Israel does to them. and also what they plan to do to whatever Iran does to Israel and what Israel plans to do to Iran. So that's not a good sign at all. If we could trust Trump to not want war, that would be one thing. But he actually has proven himself to be quite the bully. He likes to push people around. He likes to have people submit, countries submit to whatever his will is. And so it seems pretty clear that this is going to go kinetic, I think. Now, when it does, a lot of stuff's going to be crazy because, they say history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. But actually what happens is people actually learn and behave differently. We're not, this isn't like somebody breaking their New Year's resolution. Well, every year I break the same New Year's resolution. Okay, that's not what it is. Iran has learned a great deal. Any country that's at war, especially if they got beat up, if they lost, that's when you learn your lessons. You learn them. And Iran has learned them well from being smacked around for so long with these periodic attacks by Israel and sometimes us. So they have been very clear with what their response will be. And it'd be one thing if we could say, well, they shouldn't really broadcast what they're going to do because the U.S. with their two little aircraft carriers and whatever, and air bases in Doha, we will counter that. Well, that's big talk. Can we counter it? I don't think so. And also the military, it's a mess. U.S. military. I mean, it's a mess. Trump gave it $1 trillion. And now he's talking about upping it to 1.5 trillion to the Pentagon. He's been talking about it all year, and I don't know if he probably will get to. He'll probably do it. And yet they've never even looked at what's wrong on the inside of the Pentagon. They haven't looked at why our weapon systems are so expensive, so hard to maintain, so hard to keep operational. We got this F-35. We have sent it's a crazy expensive. The life cycle, the story of the F-35, which is now, of course, in major production in many countries. We've sold it to them. Super expensive. Do you know what the operational rate is? Like how many hours of the day or percentage of time that it is actually ready to go and do a job? 35%. That's a global statistic. Okay. So that's even in American bases where we're not being shot at. It's not war conditions. And our bases are really nice. We have nice bases for them to fly off of. It's 35% around the world. So it's, where it's lower than that, where they are under attack or where the infrastructure isn't really the most pristine to support this very precious aircraft. And not just 35% ready to fly, but when it does fly, if it's raining, it's not stealthy. Now we can see it. Now we can see it and shoot it down. Now it's got to do its other type of defenses, So that's what we produce. And we produce it at very high cost and we produce it very slowly relative. Our production line takes a lot of money and a lot of time. That's what we produce. Now, the rest of the world, that'd be fine if it was 30 years ago because we were the top dogs. But the rest of the world has, we laugh, the Russians and the Chinese steal our designs. Yeah, they do. And we'll steal theirs if we get a chance. That's normal. But they steal our designs and then they make a cheaper, faster, more reliable, stronger, carrying more weight, carrying more bombs version of it, number one. And also, since we have been pushing the world around for 35 years or more with our aircraft, with our, strategic reach and our aircraft carriers and all that, what have they done? Well, they've increased their defensive ability against us because we were the ones messing with them. So, that's what you do, right? You don't repeat history. You go and think, well, they took us out. What was the lessons learned? Okay, how do we defend better? Or how do we counter that? And so what they have is hypersonic missiles, among other things. Everybody's got the drones, but we're not the leader in drones. We want drone technology. We have to buy it from Israel. Honestly, we're not developing that. We're not really doing that. But other countries that had less money and more war to deal with and they're saying, what can we do? Well, drone stuff works. So the rest of the world's way ahead of us in drone warfare. They're way ahead of us in defensive and missile technology. They're far more creative. They have shorter production lines. They spend a lot less money for a lot more. They get more bang for the buck. This is the world that Trump thinks he's going to dominate with $1 trillion Pentagon. Well, if you have $1 trillion in the Pentagon and 800 billion of it is pissed away every year, right? Because it didn't buy you any defense. It just enriched people. It kept people employed, kept production lines open very slowly. Well, that's not going to hack it. And so I don't know what Trump is thinking. I think he does know this. And I think that's why he wants to pour another 500 billion in, because he realizes you can give the Pentagon $1 trillion, but you're not going to get $1 trillion worth of defense out of them. So he knows it, but he's not even trying to fix it. This is what is frustrating, because there are ways to make our military better and more appropriate and more efficient. We're not looking at any of that. We're just throwing money at it and threatening the whole world. So what I think is going to happen is we're going to get smacked. One of those carriers probably won't float back in one piece. That's what I'm thinking. Now, is that going to cause a nuclear war? Well, I don't know. I hope not. Trump's an angry guy, but I don't know. The Israelis have 200 or 300 nuclear weapons. We don't know how many of them are operational. We don't know where exactly they are. They could have them in other countries for all we know. Are they going to use that if push comes to shove? I don't know. It could get really bad. And frankly, I don't trust the president. I don't trust the president because he doesn't listen to the people that are telling him things like this. Because you could say, well, you and I, we're not right. We're just being way too negative. We're saying only the bad stuff that could happen. Okay, fine. But at least one person out of 10 needs to be doing that in the circle around Trump. And I don't have the sense that he has that person up there that is telling him. And, the one person that was anti-war, Tulsi Gabbard, she's under huge attack, been under attack forever because the neocons absolutely despise her. But she's been marginalized. So we're not even clear that she gets to see Trump or even talk to him. It's very, they have cut out the people that would give him some common sense feedback on how he ought to be conducting business. And really, honestly, we wouldn't even have an Iran issue if it wasn't for Israel. Israel wants Iran to be blown up. They want us to do it. They want to keep killing Gazans. They want us to rebuild it. They want stuff from us. What do we get from them? What's the trade-off? Oh, your grandkids? We're not going to whack you like JFK. I think the guy there mentioned, seriously, since JFK was shot, they say there was a comedian, I think he was from Arkansas. You know what I'm talking about. Some guy used to smoke cigarettes and have his jokes. And he had a little, he's passed away from cancer, but he had a little clip where he said, every president gets elected and they're going to put America, they're going to do their thing, whatever they've promised. And then right afterwards or right before they are inaugurated, they bring him into a little room and they show him the real Zapruder video. Well, not really the Zapruder, but they show him what really happened. And then they say, any questions? And then all the presidents march in line. Now, you could say, well, that's the CIA or the deep state, but I think clearly Israel has been a major part of this. And right after, LBJ was the president after, obviously, JFK was killed. And it was 1967 when they blew up the Liberty, the USS Liberty, and strafed it and shot the guys in the water and tried to eliminate all the witnesses. And LBJ pulled back. We had fighters launched because they got a message out. So one of the carriers in the Med launched over there to get to eyeball situation, whatever. And LBJ called them back and let that strafing go on for another 2 hours. And then finally, it actually, I think the boat itself, the Israelis quit because they couldn't get the rest of them. They were unable to really do it. But, and news out on that, even recently, that's been 1967, that's 45 years ago. The news on that, even today, is Israeli pilots that did it knew very well what they were doing because it was written up. LBJ and the establishment in Washington at that time, the deep state at that time, said, "Oh no, it was purely mistaken identity. It was an accident." No, it wasn't. They intended to blame Egypt. They intended to sink our spy ship because we were collecting data. They didn't want that either. Intended to sink it, blame it on Egypt, and bring America into the 1967 war. Again, Israel as victim, but they're not a victim. They are not a victim. They're the opposite of a victim. They are the purveyors of a lot of bad juju. So anyway, we got that. Same thing's going on now, and we could solve our problems by putting America first, which is what Trump promised to do. And that means if Israel wants a war with Iran or Syria, or let's say they want to massacre 680 million or 680,000, half the population of Gaza. Let's say they just want to kill them. You go do that, but you're not getting our help and our weapons and our top cover to do it. And you know what? A lot of stuff would quit because they need that. They need the Venezuelan oil shipped over there, right? If that hadn't happened, that doesn't help America. We don't need their oil. We're a big oil exporter. What do we want with them? If we were smart, we're exporting oil. What do we want? Higher oil prices, right? We want to make that profit. Take over Venezuela, shut it all down. They're exporting 1 million barrels a day. How about zero? Just do that, because if they want oil, they can buy American oil, and we can profit. That's the self-serving, that's the way you would do it if you truly cared about that. But no, we wanted cheap or free oil given to our friends in Israel. No, Israel wants that, and Trump wants that. Does the rest of the country want that? No. Americans are like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Anyway.
First, M Sparks 187. Thank you for the $5 super chat. And I know I've had you for a while, but I have to ask you at least 2 or 3 more questions.
I'll try to be succinct. I'll try not to go on and on like I usually do.
No, this is what I love, because we get genuine truth and we get the rawness of it, and I love that. That's why I try my best not to interrupt, because sometimes you give us some things that make us go, I didn't even think about that. But like, as we're talking about the war budget, I remember Mike Maloof, former Pentagon person. He said that whatever they tell you the Pentagon's budget is 2 to 5 times or 2 to 3 times as much as what they normally say it is. And they will never tell you the true figure. So if Trump is trying to get 1.5, especially at a time when America's economy is hamstrung and is in a debt spiral, he's really trying to get at least $3 trillion for war. And if we look at, as you said, the misappropriation of the funds, this doesn't happen in China. This doesn't happen in Russia. If they steal the money and do not churn out working products, they go to prison or they get killed or something like this.
That's actually true, and we've had lots of cases both in both Russia and China where if somebody was rich businessmen were taking advantage or misusing Chinese state funds. It's bad. It's bad for them. They will hold them accountable and they'll put them in jail, and worse actually. We don't do that. We reward them with positions and high level appointments in the government. That's how we do it when they rip you off enough. So, that's amazing. I do know, the CIA budget is a black budget. Well, part of it's not, but the big part is black, meaning that they don't share that with anybody in Congress. Maybe they share it with a couple people and then they swear them to secrecy, like the Congress has any right to hold secrets from Americans. But the CIA budget, a lot of their black budget money, their secret money is in Pentagon budget. It's hidden away in the Pentagon money. So that's part of what Maloof is probably talking about. But yeah, that's interesting because he would know. He was a neocon for many, many years, and he broke away. And every once in a while, you'll see him on RT now on Russia Today. And I remember the first time I saw him on Russia Today. I'm like, I know Maloof, and he's a neocon. You know what? But it turns out, I guess, and he lost all his friends when he did it because, you know, his friends were neocons. Like me, my friends were not neocons, so I didn't lose any friends when I talked about him back in the day. But from aloof, his whole social circle was these people. And when he started to question the kinds of things that were being done that are negative for this country years ago, he got ostracized. And so he probably, and he knows a lot, but he was an insider. So that makes a lot of sense. And that's also very frightening, because if you think of the other money that the U.S. government spends under Trump in particular, Homeland Security money. Homeland Security didn't even have it 25 years ago. It was part of the Patriot Act. You know, they built this thing up. And it's got all these different agencies. And all of those agencies, most of them have grown tremendously under a Homeland Security umbrella. So your ICE guys, your immigration control enforcement people, that's nothing but federal cops. And they're terrible federal cops. They're poorly trained. They're conducting law outside of the Constitution. You know, this is like shoot first, ask questions later. This is how they conduct it. Oh, I see a guy. The computer says an alien lives here. Let's go take him and his family out. And it turns out, you know, but this is all without warrants. It's all without Fourth Amendment protections. You know, this is all without trial, pre-trial and detentions and things like that. This is a federal police force, and their budget has exploded. You know, the borders were pretty loosey-goosey. That was a big thing that got Trump elected, right? But he fixed that. Well, he didn't even fix it. The election of Donald Trump in November of 2024, by December, the word was out, and people weren't even, you know, the mass numbers of people, the desperate people from the southern border. And those who were coming in from around the world through that very porous border, they were just like, yeah, not really worth it now, because we know what he's going to do. And he doesn't need to build a fence. It's enforcement. And he did have that as a success. That was probably the first 3 or 4 weeks of his second term, you know, and the MAGA guys were pretty happy. And then the very next thing he did was say, oh, there's no Epstein thing. And all you people wanting Epstein, you're a bunch of crazy people. Get out of my club, you know. You know, Trump has mainly built up the Border Patrol, not just the patrol of the, you know, all of the different Homeland Security functions, and ATF. You know, this is like the MAGA people are all about guns. You know, we want our guns. We want our guns, and we don't want you knowing about it. Well, Trump don't care about guns. He's not even a gun guy. You know, he's a New Yorker where they ban guns, so he like totally comfortable with that. But he has built up the ATF, right, to make them more powerful. And it turns out that I saw something just the other day, but we've known about this for a long time. It's against the Constitution, or it's a violation of the Constitution to have a federal database of guns. States can do what they want to do, but you can't have a federal database of gun ownership and all that. And it turns out the ATF, to some extent under Biden, which would be expected, right? Because Biden didn't run on that. He is saying, oh, we're going to limit these guns. But Trump is continuing the Biden ATF power grab, database grab, building databases, putting pressure on gun sellers, whether they're shops or individuals or whatever, to document and create a searchable database. Because look, we live in the age of AI, right? Everybody's got to have a database, and the bigger, the better. So, you know, Trump is doing that, and that's going under the radar a little bit. But his MAGA support group surely does not want to see a stronger, more powerful federal government with a stronger federal police force, because the next step for that is what? You know, we see on TV, oh, SWAT teams go in and people get swatted, you know, and they go in and they don't have any good data, and they go in and knock doors down, beat people up, shoot people accidentally, whatever, or on purpose. And we say, oh, that's happening over there. That's in that town, that city, you know, and we think, oh, I hope they got the guy, right? No, that guy you hope they got, that's going to be you. Okay, it's going to be all of us, because the government wants its power, and Trump was elected to make federal government and the swamp associated with it less powerful. And what has he done? To me, it looks powerful. Yeah. And Bondi, you know, she was before the Congress yesterday answering questions. Yeah, but you know, do you notice how she didn't answer questions? And that's not unusual for any government appointee. They often don't answer the questions. But she was fighting back. Like, oh, you're a bad congressperson. Oh, I don't care about you. You're stupid. Oh, why are you asking that question? You're an idiot. And then they go, oh, but the stock market's really big. So how many abused young girls do we have to tolerate so that the stock market can be overvalued? I mean, is this what she's saying? I mean, but she was very aggressive. And it's like, wow, where does that come from? Where does that come from? That comes from a very powerful federal government that has contempt for the people. That's where that comes from. And we got that under Trump.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because actually I was going to bring that up, because she was talking about the stock market is at all-time record highs. Shouldn't we be focused on that instead of Epstein or whatever? And I'm like, wow, when she said it that brazen, it showed me that America had moved into the fascist era or close to a dictatorship.
So. Yeah. I mean, it's true. And we're very close to that. And also, I don't think Bondi gets it, because she's not the brightest bulb that's out there, but she does what she's told. She is very devoted to Trump. I mean, she's, she wants to please him and whatnot. But when you talk about the stock market being high, well, first off, people with retirement accounts in the stock market, they indirectly own stocks or whatever. They care about that. And the super rich care about it, and the capital funds care about it. The average American who is struggling, and that would be 70%, maybe 75% of the people in this country, we're living paycheck to paycheck. We're struggling. We're having to make choices. We are in debt. Most of Americans are carrying debt. They're not, it's not easy for them. And what they are starting to learn, all kinds of people, of not even political, just all kinds of political backgrounds, they're starting to learn that, this dollar in the stock market, it really doesn't get me anymore. My purchasing power of the dollar. They go down to the grocery store and get 2 bags for $65. They go down the grocery store and they see shrinkflation, right? They go like, oh, now they're selling sodas in little 6-ounce bottles, which is probably good for soda, right? Because, you could get too much sugar if you drink a lot of soda. But hey, let the market decide that. But the market is deciding it. What they're doing is they're charging you 12-ounce prices for 6-ounce bottles. And you go, oh, well, I guess it's just what I should do. That's all I got to choose from, whatever. No, that's the waste. That is the gutting of the value of the dollar that we get from the Federal Reserve that prints money and creates money. They don't really print that much physically, like we think from a printing press, but they create money that can be spent. And the thing about inflation and about governments printing their money at the demand of the government is it takes a little while. It's like counterfeit money, right? Listen, and it's illegal, right, to counterfeit money. But I imagine with the computers, probably anybody could do it for a little while. But of course, you would go to jail if we counterfeited money. That's a federal crime. That's a crime against the Treasury. You will go to jail. You will be punished. But the government, but when you counterfeit money, first guy to use that fake 20 and gets it passed, they get $20 worth of goods, right? And that keeps going on until people say, oh, wait, we got to pull that out of circulation. That's not real money. And then whoever's holding it suffers. They got taken. But the first user of the counterfeited funds is the beneficiary, right? Now, who do you think the first user is of federal created money through the acquisition of debt and the Treasury buying debt that the Fed has created or whatever? Who gets to use that ability to spend money? Well, same guys we're talking about. Big corporations, government agencies like the Pentagon and others, all the government, and our allies that we give money to. Now, I hate to pick on Israel, although it has to be done. Somebody's got to do it. But Israel has received, they receive their normal $4 billion a year aid. Most of it's military. And then they get other aid too. But the $4 billion a year is part of this long-term agreement we have. But then they get extra stuff that they need because they ran out of stuff bombing Gaza. They ran out of stuff bombing Syria. They ran out of stuff bombing Lebanon. They ran out of stuff bombing Iran. They wasted some stuff when they bombed Qatar. Okay, so they're using up a lot of stuff. And Trump has, I think, given them 2 separate additional aids, multi-billion-dollar gifts of weapons and money. And of course, it's not so much the cash money, but that money. See, the government, Trump is the first user in this case of made up money. But ultimately, that made up money is devalued, right? It dilutes the system. And our money for the average 75% of people that have to go shopping every couple times a week to get their food at the grocery store, they're going, wait a minute, I'm hardly getting anything for this. And then they look at their paychecks and they go, well, I got a 3% inflation raise, but my food bill went up 40% this past year, which it has, honestly. I mean, look at your receipts.
Yeah.
Anybody that wants to figure this out, you don't have to listen to the government. They're lying to you. Look at your receipts. Look at what you bought in January or even 2 years ago, and look what it costs you now. You're going to see what it is. That's your inflation, and it comes from the government allowing other people to use our dollars that aren't really created at all. So anyway, it's a bad situation. This is what Ron Paul has been talking about for years and years. And one of the viewers mentioned the really great interview that Tucker Carlson just did. It's just up today with Ron Paul. He's 90 years old. He's still sharp, but it's a good reminder because Ron Paul hasn't said new stuff. Ron Paul has said the same thing for 35 years, and it turns out he was right on most all of it. And he talks about war, peace, and the economy, and he's right on everything. So it's a good reminder that this evidence is out there and people are picking up on it, which means if our government can't listen to us, the people, and what we're going through and what we're dealing with and what we want, which is peace and not war. Everybody wants that. If it can't listen to us and it's going to go do the opposite, then maybe we have a dictatorship. Maybe we have this fascism. And I think we actually, I hate to use the word fascism because it's thrown around so much, and people go, "Oh, you're fascist. You don't agree with me, so you're fascist." Well, I'm probably not a fascist because I don't agree with a person, but we do have fascism, and we have had it for some time in this country, in the sense that we have the government, and Trump has accelerated this. He's done even more of it than any previous president, of investing government dollars and government favors on certain industrial sectors and certain companies. I mean, he bought Intel. And I have a theory about why he put 10% of taxpayer dollars or fake dollars or whatever on Intel. You want to hear my theory?
Yes.
I have a theory. It's a conspiracy theory. But, not really. I think it's true. But, no, Intel had a chip making factory in Israel, and it was damaged in June with the Iranian missiles hit part of the factory, and it knocked down part of the factory and it damaged it. And Intel, of course, globally was having trouble. Okay, before Trump bought it, it still is having trouble, but it was one of those like a company that was happening. They were doing a lot of job cuts. They cut the factory in Israel, but they also cut other places too. The one in Israel was cut because it was blown up. But they said, you know what, we're not going to rebuild that. We've got to contract and figure out how to make a dollar, because Intel had a lot of competition. So Trump goes in right after that. Well, first he criticized the Chinese guy, or he's not a Chinese guy. He's an American guy with an Asian last name. I can't remember, the head of Intel. First, Trump criticized him, and that was right after he said we're not rebuilding that plant in Israel. And he criticized him. He said he's a terrible leader. And then it wasn't 2 weeks later, and Trump said, we're going to buy 10% of Intel. And why do you think he did that? He wants to control Intel's decisions. And probably Intel needed the infusion of funds, like a bailout, too big to fail kind of thing. But if we talk about too big to fail, if we talk about controlling industries and companies to pursue a state agenda, which one of them is obviously, if it's good for Israel, Washington wants to do it. That's a state agenda. It's actually pretty well articulated by most of the members of Congress too. So we can't, that's not even up for debate. One of America's agendas is to do things that are good for Israel. But when you invest tax dollars in companies, when you provide all kinds of favorable and unfavorable regulatory rules and things to force companies to do government bidding. I mean, you think about the surveillance state, all these Facebook's a private company. They can do whatever they want, right? Within the law. But the government wants Facebook and X and all the social medias and Google, they want them to collect data on Americans because the government can't do that. The federal government is prevented from collecting all that data, but somehow they're not prevented from purchasing it. They can't collect it, but they can purchase it. So, the government encourages IT and network type communication type companies, surveillance companies. They encourage them to do things to pursue a government policy. And you could say, well, every government has an interest in this. Okay, fine. But when that interest becomes an obsession, when that interest grows so deep into the tentacles, reach into every part of our economy, you got fascism. So when somebody says you're a fascist, I'll sit there and explain it to them. Yeah, we do have fascism in this country. And you can't really blame Trump entirely, but he fits the bill. But Biden was a big part of this. Mm-hmm. Every president before COVID. I mean, I don't know if you remember when George Bush did he changed the law that allowed churches to take government money and still be tax exempt. I forget what he called it. And he was a Republican. I mean, Bush, whatever. And some of the conservatives and the constitutionalists were going, that does not sound like it conforms with the First Amendment, the separation of church and state. Because already the churches are tax exempt, and now we're going to actually give them money. And the argument that people made, not everybody, obviously, the dissenters, they said, you know what? If a church becomes dependent on government money rather than their members and whatever, and charity, but they become dependent on government infusion of funds, then they're not independent. And they may actually be asked at some point to become part of state propaganda. Oh my God. Yeah, that actually happened. Yeah. And it was predicted. We knew it was going to happen. And that's fascism. That's fascism because churches are not part of the business community necessarily. Well, some of them are. The Mormon church is probably a huge business entity. And I think the Catholic Church for decades, very wealthy, right? Because of years and years of whatever it is they did, taking things and collecting them. But having governments involved in those churches, it's not really like involving in the economic sector directly, but it is involving in society. So when the state becomes everything, Mussolini, this is his definition of fascism. Mm-hmm. Everything for the state, nothing outside of the state, and all for the state. No individuality, the state controls everything around. Now, if you want to go with that definition, yes, this country is looking extremely fascist. And, we're even to the point of expanding outward to take other people's resources. Mm-hmm. Venezuela, prime example. Greenland, prime example. 51st state in Canada, prime example. We want Cuba, prime example. We're expanding outwards to absorb other people's resources. That's a very fascist type thing. So I don't like to throw the word around without a big drawn out explanation. But once it's explained, I think people can say, oh my God, I was right. I said Trump was a fascist. I didn't know what I was talking about. He actually is a proto-fascist, Now he would disagree with that. I'm sure if you told Trump that, he thinks, fake news. I'm not a fascist. But Trump doesn't know the definition of fascism.
So are we living in the decline, in the fall of the American Republic? And before you answer that, if war breaks out, and we think it will, in West Asia, and we lose an aircraft carrier, will that be precede more fascist laws within America, and will it become more dictatorial?
Well, if history, what we know from every country that fights a war, whether they've had it brought to them or they have pursued the war, domestic controls, state controls over the people increase. And, we don't think back to Wilson very much back in the turn of the century, early 1900s. He was elected, Woodrow Wilson was elected president, and his campaign platform was, I will keep you out of the war. And the war they were talking about was the Great War. It was the war in Europe that was stirring up. And he was elected and he said, I'm going to keep you out of the war. But that was a lie, much like Trump lied about putting America first. And the first thing he did when Wilson got elected, and before he had a stroke, because after he had a stroke, we don't know who it was like a Biden situation. His wife and his advisors were running the show. This is, Biden. It's not the first time we've had a physically impaired individual in the White House. Anyway, he got us into the wars by first aiding sending our commercial ships over, sending weapons and arms over to Europe. And within 2 years, of course, we joined the war late. But one of the things that happened, and this was not a big war for us. World War I was not a big war for Americans. We came to the party late, whatever. And yet we imprisoned Americans who were of German heritage, if they spoke German, didn't pick on the Japanese too much. But Germans, this country has tons of Germans. And in the turn of the century, we had a lot of immigration too. So there were a lot of, and they did to them, violated their rights, put them in camps, kept them out of society. And there, you can read about this. A lot of them were in the South, these German camps, and people said, "Oh, never met a German." And people that worked in the camps that were Americans, regular Southerners who were doing their jobs, as prison guards or whatever, they got to meet Germans for the first time. And of course, afterwards, some of them married the Germans. So, we recover from these terrible things that happened. But that was directed from Washington. Anti-constitutional. Also, the Alien and Sedition Acts. Reporters, people who spoke out against involving themselves in World War I, which of course was Woodrow Wilson's promise, his campaign promise. It was okay when he made the campaign promise, but once he got elected, now if you complained about it, they prosecuted people, threw them in jail, and in fact considered a lot of people to be spies for the enemy. It wasn't even our enemy. This was in a European war that had. They still don't even 100%. They debate why that war happened, right? Because there's no real reason for it. But yeah, so every time we go to war, we tamp down on our rights, our rights for free speech, our rights for association, our First Amendment rights. They tamp down on our Fourth Amendment rights, the right to have privacy. It's not really a right to privacy, but it's a right not to have your home invaded because the government thinks something in there is not good, not kosher with them. So we see it every time. Today, we have the technology that allows actual lockdowns of whole cities. We saw it with the bombing in Boston years ago, the Boston Marathon bombing. They locked down. It was the first time they really effectively, cops locked down a good part of Boston for that. And they talked about that as a lesson learned. Yeah, this is what we did right. This is what we did wrong. This is great. Since then, we've had lots of lockdowns. Then we had COVID with a whole national type of economic lockdown situation. And they used propaganda to make sure that all the little devoted patriots in the country would help lock down their neighbors, right? How many people got dirty looks if they didn't wear a mask? Everybody. Mm-hmm. Anybody not wearing a mask got a dirty look. Mm-hmm. And sometimes more than that. That is an example of when in crisis, when the federal government is threatened, abroad or domestically, they lock down. And now what do we have? We have AI, we have all kinds of surveillance, we have federal databases that are extremely populated with data on all of us. They spy on everything, they collect everything. And we have a federal police force, multiple federal police forces that are authorized to conduct federal law enforcement, which is illegal. Federal law enforcement is very limited by law. But you've got ICE officers pushing cops out of the way because they want to shoot somebody. And that's okay. That's okay. So yeah, we should be very afraid of getting in a war because we are very close to having a situation that really truly shows that we don't have a republic. We don't even have a shell of a republic. Now, can we regain it? I don't know. Can Gaza rebuild itself? Probably not. When you get damaged that bad, you don't get to really rebuild. You suffer. Generations suffer. That's where we're at. I think, it's very scary what they're doing because a nuclear war could if you have to trust all the leaders of the world, and Trump's one of those leaders, but the other ones, there's other ones that aren't any good. Look at the Europeans. They love war. Their people in Europe, all the European countries hate their leaders, but the leaders love war and they hate the people. You think they wouldn't push a button to try to start something? Of course they would. They have no particular qualities that are going to make peace. They like war. War benefits them. I mean, this is a big problem. So yeah, I'm a little bit worried, but this is where we're at. I mean, hopefully I'm wrong and Trump pulls those carriers away and tells Israel, you're on your own, start behaving. That's all it is. I mean, foreign policy really is simple. What would we tell our children? Our kid keeps getting beat up. Okay, well, let me go see. Can you avoid the guy? Can you avoid the conflict? How about not calling names? Now, if it's really a bully, we take care of it. But there's also things we tell our kid first. Can't we just all get along, right? We try the best we can. This is the right advice. How come we can't do that in foreign policy? We can't behave. We can't show respect for other countries or other people. We say, oh, those people deserve to be killed. Gazans, they deserve to die. They don't count. How can we say that? We wouldn't say that in a neighborhood. If we lived in a neighborhood and we had somebody at the end of the neighborhood and we didn't like them, we would never say that their children deserve to die. I don't know anybody who would think that way, but our leadership thinks that way. Around the world, I mean, they do. So that is not sustainable. So something's going to happen. Break it loose. I hope it's peaceful, but.
Last question of the day. You've been so generous with your time, and I'm really eating it up. Last question of the day. And I need to ask you this because you have a strategic mind. You served in the military, and I know a lot of times when I ask questions similar to this, people tell me what they hope for. And so instead of telling me what you hope for, use your military mind and tell me what is the probability of this. Okay, we hear often across the media that in the multipolar world, there'll be three poles of power: the United States, Russia, and China. Okay, now common sense tells me this: if you're the greatest debtor nation in the history of the world, if you have no manufacturing or industrial base, if you're alienating everybody, if your interest payments are $1 trillion going on $2 trillion,
That's right.
How is that a possibility to remain a relevant global power when you have more debt than all of the nations in the history of the world combined? How is that a possibility?
Yeah. It's not a possibility. And I always like to quote Ben Stein's father. I can't remember his name, but he worked for Nixon in the economic side. And he said, when things can't go on forever, they don't. When things can't go on, they stop. And this is the case. So what's going to happen? What I think is going to happen, it's already happening. The dollar is not, people don't have confidence in the dollar, whether it's Americans or anybody else in the world. They look and they say, are we over invested? The global world looks and says, do I have too many dollars? Because the dollar's becoming risky. And it's becoming risky not because of Trump necessarily. It's becoming risky because of that debt you're talking about. Because when debt can't be paid, it doesn't get paid. And, Americans know this. The idea of bankruptcy, everybody knows what that is. We probably know somebody who went through it. And so what happens is not all the creditors get paid, and everybody's poorer afterwards. And the creditors themselves could take a big hit. So who's the creditors to the United States? Most of it is Americans, and we're going to get the shaft. Okay. Be prepared for that. Be prepared for that. And we're actually getting the shaft right now because they're inflating the money, because that's how they pay you less, because money's just purchasing power. What's the purchasing power of the dollar? It's a fraction. It's 1% of what it was 100 years ago. So you have to take a lot more dollars to buy the same thing. It could go higher. It's not even in hyperinflation. The dollar isn't even near hyperinflation, but that could be the future. It's usually what happens when things get out of control. But the rest of the world who has said, well, I like to have dollars because I can buy stuff that America produces. Oh, wait, we're not producing that much stuff anymore, right? They got some very expensive military exports. We only buy them because they threaten us, basically. You know, either buy our stuff or we'll bomb you. So they don't want what we have. That is a reason not to hold as many dollars. They also see the dollar as a much higher risk currency than alternatives. And I'm not saying the ruble is so great, and I'm not saying the yuan's that great. I don't know what's great, but what I'm saying is the dollar ain't so great anymore. It comes with risk, so they're pulling away from that. And already, what we're seeing, the countries, China, Japan, well, let's just name those two. They used to be the major holders of American debt. China no longer is a major holder. They have been divesting for a while. They don't buy our treasuries. There's a lot of reasons for that. Trump's behavior is one of them, but it's also that they see the risk. Japan has been a very dedicated buyer of American treasuries, and they're cutting back. And why are they cutting back? Oh, they elected their own Trump. But this one's actually putting Japan first. You know, the new president over there, some lady, she is very nationalistic, putting the country first, and she's also militaristic, you know, but whatever. And they have not bought as much. They're starting to cut back. Of course, obviously, foreign countries that have holdings of their resources, whether it's dollars or gold, in the United States, they're like, can I get it back? Can I get my gold back? Can I get my dollars back? You know, Germany has been for a long time, and their economy sucks, partly because they do what we tell them, and it's not good for them. But they have been for a long time moving their money out, their gold out of the United States into their own vaults in Germany. And that's a slow process. And you say, well, it's a slow process because, you know, you got a lot of security. No, it's a slow process because we're not producing the gold to give to them. We're like, oh, we're slow rolling it. Now, think about the message that sends when Germany, who is our best ally, wants to get their gold back, and we slow roll the hell out of them. It's taken years and years. And then we're telling them, oh, we'll have it to you in 2028. They asked for it in 2024. Okay. What message does that send to the rest of the world? So it's not so much what we're doing to ourselves. That is bad enough. But the rest of the world sees it more clearly than most Americans do, because we're really too close to the problem. But the rest of the world knows what's happening. And so what they're doing, it's just like you see a kid, some neighbor kid, you can't control him, and he's playing with dynamite. And we're like, stop playing with dynamite. You're going to blow yourself up. But what else do? We pull back. Mm-hmm. We get our animals. If he's close to the fence, we make sure our dog's not over there. We protect ourselves because we see an explosion happening, and we don't want to get caught up in it. And that's what the rest of the world is doing. And that's what they're going to keep doing. That's what BRICS are about. You know, BRICS aren't trying to replace the dollar or compete with the dollar. BRICS are a place that's safer than the dollar, or somewhat perceived to be somewhat safer. So, yeah.
So we're living in the end of the republic, in so many words. For sure,
we are, and that doesn't mean the end of life. It doesn't mean the end of society. It doesn't mean the end of Americans. We are, you know, change is going to happen. But what we've created for ourselves is it's counterproductive. It is a burden that we cannot bear. You know, Washington's debt alone is a burden that we cannot bear, and so something's going to happen.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, we've got to have you back on the platform soon.
Sure enough. I love talking to you, Rashid.
And I love talking to you too. I mean, I get so much from it. And that's why I love to just let you go at it, because we learn so much from you. Thank you so much, and be blessed and be safe.
You too. Thank you so much.
Everybody listen, please hit the like button and subscribe. And remember, as I always go out, I always tell you this: do right to others, not because there's some material gain to have or some accolades, but do right by others because it's the right, the humane, and the godly thing to do. Because even when no one else is watching you, remember that God Almighty is watching you. As my late, great, and beautiful mother would always say, God sits high on the throne of power, but he looks low at the actions of man. Know that I love each and every one of you who loves truth, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true. But above all things, remember this one thing above all: stay righteous. Hey, mama, your baby boy still loves you more than life. Thank you, everybody. We're out of here. Peace.